This one's good.
Welcome to Hammer Time Podcast, episode number 58.
That was good. That was really good. That was Chris.
I'm not done yet.
Keep going.
I am co-host Sassy Al, the assassin. With me tonight is our other co-host, Casimir the Swede, and as always, Henry P. Miller. Henry.
Hello, and welcome to the podcast. Casimir is this time joining it remotely, and I'm sat with the assassin Sasquatch himself.
Yeah.
Back in Copenhagen. Trip to Sweden was fun, and back in the Amatime Studios.
Yeah, did you guys get a game going the next day?
Oh, fucking hell.
Yeah.
Casimir, like, put it up there.
Dwarfed
and
you?
it was red raw, mate.
Did he dwarf you?
Oh.
What were you playing? What was the lineup?
It was I was playing my VC list that I've been playing for like a while, more because I just didn't want to have to fuck around with what was in my box already.
Which Barrow Guard unit did you take?
Hand weapon shield.
Okay. Because you also have one with great weapons, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Casimir fucking... I don't know whether you diced me or I just played like shit, but there was like...
I think it was mostly that I diced you, and that the matchup was pretty good for me.
Yeah. Well, Casimir one-shotted my vampire on a monstrous revenant with a cannon. Just hit, wound, dead. Dead.
Well, that's the first time it happened for me, and I was like, never gonna drop this. Never.
So that was dwarves, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean so I think what that match really showed is how much higher above their weight class the Seekers punch. Like, I mean, I had 2 units of 25 Seekers, and I mean that's a lot of points, but it felt like I could take on your entire army with those 2 units, basically.
Yeah,
which is a lot more points.
I think it's that I think it's also because they're not scoring, and then we were playing banners, right?
Yeah.
So when you're playing banners and you have Seekers, like they're a unit that your opponent has to deal with.
But they don't get any points for
But you don't get any points for dealing with them, and you usually have to invest a points to actually get rid of them. So in this scenario, the way that it happened, like the battle happened exactly how I wanted it to happen. Everything was in the right matchup, everything was positioned correctly, but then the Seekers just fucking went to town and rolled shit, and it was shit hot, and it was like, okay.
Yeah,
and
like
then
all the shooting turned on and took off all the little small pieces and stuff.
Yeah. And like after the first turn, I was like, "Oh, Casimir's playing like shit. This is going to be easy. Everything is perfect."
we talked about that. Was pretty funny. So
and then Casimir started rolling dice.
So like last time we played, there was a point where you were like, "Oh, you should have taken your Seeker character out the unit so you could threaten the monsters." Blah blah blah. And then we started talking, and I was like, "What kind of shooting do you have?" And you're like, "I don't really have anything except banshees." And I was like, "Okay, well that's fine. I'll just put this guy outside the unit this time." And then on the first turn, Henry put 2 banshees in front of the Seeker character and screamed them off. And I was like, "Oh, what?" And then he panicked a unit of dudes with guns as well. So it looked like it was going to go like real south real fast. Yeah. But then the Dwarfs rallied. So
I was after killing the Seeker character and panicking the whatever the fuck they call it these days, marksman. Like I was like, oh, okay, this is going to go very well. The Seekers are like lined up against the ghouls, and my like vampire and the revenant is ready to countercharge the stupid giant things or in the flank, and everything was going to be fine, and it just went really bad.
Yeah,
pretty much the same thing happened the day after, because I had a game with Patrick, and he was playing Soaring Ancients, and I'd done everything right. I had got the Temple Guard down to 10 guys with a Cottle, and I had the Barrow Guard in the front, and Lucy was in the back, and I was like, oh, all I need to do is kill 10 Temple Guard with a Varkalak, a Vampire, and a Barrow Guard unit, and I killed like 2 Temple Guard, and they were stubborn, and I was like, oh no, and then everything came in, and I should have ran the Quatter down, but it didn't happen. It was very sad. It was very, very sad.
So
I'm on a losing streak right now. I've lost 3 in a row.
On the just about that Ghouls and Seekers matchup. The Ghouls are good because their poison beats the
Yeah, basically the ghouls will outgrind the Seekers. Because
Yeah, like the ghouls are really good at that stuff with no armor, and the Seekers are completely naked, so they just take a lot of hits and die fast.
Yeah.
But isn't it? So the ghouls, the big thing with them is they've got their poison, right?
Yeah, they have poison, and in the second round of combat, they reroll to hit, assuming you've done some wounds in the first round, which you usually do. So basically, because the Seekers are unarmored, it makes the ghouls like the perfect thing to counter them, and because ghouls are resistance 4. They only get wounded on 3+ from the death blow. So it's quite like it's almost the perfect unit to take on the Seekers, especially when you have occultism and you can get a 5 page save.
But does the poison bypass the Seekers' Aegis save?
No, there's only 6 up, so it doesn't change that much unless you're Casimir and you're just rolling all the 6s.
Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah, it's your.
It may as well be a 2+.
I really love the 6-up save. It's my favorite because nobody expected to do anything.
There was definitely one turn where I rolled like shit, and I was like, oh, it's only like 4 wounds or something, and you just rolled all the 6s. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I think I did got a Yahtzee on 6s one turn, which was fun.
Yeah.
But actually, thinking about the game, I think you actually pushed your Barrow Guard up real pre-close in turn, I guess turn 2 or turn 1, probably.
Yeah.
And I mean, I felt like that's where it kind of turned. Well, I mean, because I diced that combat, but I kind of got everything into the Barrow Guard unit before the ghoul were engaged.
Yeah, I think the vampire, he didn't do any wounds over 2 rounds of combat and then just died.
Yeah, I was like, oh, maybe I should target the vampire, and then I kill him in a turn.
Yeah. 6 attacks, hitting on 4s, wounding on 3s with a 6-up, 4-up, and just did 3 wounds.
Yeah.
Splat.
Yeah. Averages like 0.5 or something.
Yeah, I think actually I wounded on a 3 because they have strength 6 with great weapons.
Oh yeah, on the first turn. But I don't think you targeted him on the first turn.
No, exactly. On the first turn, I just went for the Barrow Guard with great weapons.
Yeah.
Weapon Master is so good.
Yeah. And the paired weapons also, I actually forgot that the paired weapons negate the parry.
Yeah.
That was maybe a mistake.
That made that combat a pretty good matchup for me, I think.
Yeah, I think in hindsight, probably right, but I still rolled like shit, and you still roll really well.
Yeah, I think on the first turn when I charged, I don't know how many dice I picked up, but I had 20 or whatever dice, and I think after I rolled hits and wounds, I had 18 wounds or something stupid. I was like, okay, well, sure.
It's also that awkward moment when the dwarf player halfway through the game is like, oh yeah, I didn't declare my grudge. You're like, oh, okay.
Halfway through the game, in turn 2.
Yeah, but then you shouldn't get it, Casimir. You shouldn't get it.
I was thinking of that. I need to make a little coin or something that has a G on it that I can put down on next to people's units or something.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it doesn't matter. It was an obvious choice anyway. But there's every now and again you play one of those games and you're like, I'm not going to be a dick. I'm just going to let them choose whatever. But it's very okay.
It's very convenient for you to decide now that we've dropped our fucking armies.
Yeah, I mean, for other lists, I definitely agree. If you play an MSU list, then it's much
I mean, you're supposed to pick before you even start placing.
I don't know when do you actually pick it?
That is a good question. I don't know either, but I think it's after you deploy, but I'm not entirely sure.
Well, Casimir, you should find out.
Yeah,
it's your army.
That's true.
Yeah.
So these are some very special beer mugs, Alex.
Are they?
These are beer mugs that are made by monks in a brewery in Strasbourg that I stole from them.
Stole from the monks.
Yeah.
We shouldn't even be drinking out of these then. We'll be cursed.
You religious? You a vampire? It's all good.
No, but I don't want to become one either. Or maybe I do.
Maybe we should drink out of these more.
A sexy vampire. A sassy vampire.
Even better.
Yeah. Next level.
Sasspire. So you declare the grudge when after you've deployed, right before you start playing.
Okay. Oh, nice. So you get to see the deployment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool, but it's also easy to forget then because you're sitting there.
Yeah.
Fucking doing all that shit, and then you're like, oh, before we begin, hang on.
Go. Don't want to mess around anymore.
Yep.
See how fast I was there?
Yeah, rocket.
See how fast I was?
Yep.
That's like when you're a clumsy person and you do shit like that all the time, and you just get so used to like catching shit without when it falls over. Like, honestly, like
So
sometimes.
what you're saying is you're really clumsy.
Yeah, I'm fucking so clumsy and knock shit over all the time, and then I'm so used to seeing things like falling off shelves when I've knocked them over that I can catch them. Like I don't know how I do it. Like that was just I didn't even think about it. I just caught it as soon as it fell. Like it didn't even hit the cushion.
That was good. It was also empty though.
Yeah, it was empty, but it had like a little bit of a thing in it.
A little trickle in there. Okay, so let's talk about the general theme for this podcast.
Yes.
Right? I guess if you're joining us in synchronous order, you've probably just heard episode 57.
Yeah, actually, no, this isn't going to go out in the same time. So technically, this is actually going to go out before episode 57, although it is episode 58.
Okay.
Because we recorded episode 57 last weekend, which will be the full Dread Elves book review.
Right.
And then this will be episode 58 that's going to go out before the Dread Elves book review. The full book review is out as part of the release schedule for the Dread Elves.
Right. So we should make this actually episode 56.5.
It's like 57, not 57, but 58.
57.
That's the best title.
Okay, so if you're listening to this in chronological release order,
it would be 57.
57. But if you're somebody who likes to like save up a number of podcasts and then binge listen to them while you're doing your hobby work, then you've just listened to a 6-hour masterpiece, right? Which I participated in 4 hours of, I think, and then I had to go.
Casimir, what time did we get to bed? It was like 5 or something.
Yeah, like Irene said, we got to bed at 5.
Yeah, it was a challenge.
I tell you what, like I blacked out so hard. Like listening back to it was like listening to not my own podcast. I could not remember discussing anything. I was like, did we like discuss that unit? And then it happened. I was like, yeah, we actually went through the whole book, and we actually had like a section at the end where we talked about other stuff. I was like, did not remember anything.
Well, nailed it.
Yeah, it was actually. I thought it was okay. Like,
so you're hearing it from the horse's mouth, Henry.
6 hour. I had listened to 6 hours of it while editing, and it was. I mean, I sat through 6 hours of it, so it wasn't that bad.
Yeah. I mean, if Henry, who already lived it for 6 hours, then listened to it again for 6 hours.
Well, I didn't remember it, so
true. But you weren't exhausted by it either. No. That's a pretty good sign.
I got through it.
So again, if you're listening to this in chronological release order, you've got 6 hours of awesome podcast to look forward to. And if you're listening to this in chronological episodic the episodic order, then we hope you enjoyed those 6.5 hours, and we're going to just bring that up to the next level by talking about the Dread Elves and their background story.
Yeah. So the Dread Elf book will be released on the 10th of December, and this is going to be the first of many sneak peeks into the Dread Elf book. So as Alex alluded to, we're going to be talking mostly about the background today. So we were supposed to get the background supplement, which was also supposed to be released on the 10th of December, along with the book. But unfortunately, the background team haven't finished, so we can't look at the background supplement. We're just going to have to talk about some random background topics.
Right, and which is convenient because Henry, you worked on the background, so you have a concept of the topics.
I didn't work on the background.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
I am part of the background team, so I have access to the background, and being on the lab team myself, I have a good idea of how the Dread Elves background actually is.
Gotcha. Well,
so I can answer your questions and be very accurate, but not like 100% accurate. So I can answer most of this stuff and have a good knowledge, but I'm sure that someone who actually wrote the background would have a better knowledge than me and maybe would correct me in a future podcast.
But I think that's a good thing because, to leave room for me and Casimir to really bitch about it.
Yeah. I can just say, well, I didn't write it, or well, I don't know. Yeah.
Or we can be like, or we can be like, well, you don't really know though, do you? So
I can say, I think.
It gives us some leverage, argumentative leverage.
I have a good idea,
which is fun. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the topic that everyone has come here to.
Oh, the big
discuss.
kickoff. Wait, before we start that, where's the sour candy set?
In the kitchen on the bench.
Okay.
So, Casimir, I hope that you've come prepared with a lot of background questions, because I have not prepared, and I would imagine Alex is probably the same.
Yeah, so I have a few. I think to start us off, I was thinking that maybe you could tell us, like, where do the Dread Elves live, and what is that like in the context of the
Okay, that's a really good question to start the ball rolling. So, the Ninth Age world is based on our world, let's say the Earth.
Yeah, like
Geographically, yeah. So there's the different continents in the same way. Just grab a ball, dude.
Good.
There's the continents in the same way as there are on the Earth. That you have like an African continent which is called Tafria. You have oh god, I'm gonna have to remember them all now. You have I think a South American continent that's called Varentia, which means that the Northern American continent is called Selexia, and there's one that's called Orgia, but I think that's Asia, and I forget what the European continent is called. But essentially, there's different continents like that, and it's roughly laid out in essentially the same way as our Earth is laid out. So, a quick background of the Dread Elves, or the elves in general. At the downfall of the Saurians, the elves moved to what is basically Europe, and they inhabited the forest of Europe. I'm going to check the name because I'm not sure. And basically, what happened is they expanded their domains, and they were somewhat of a dominant power in this. Let's call it pseudo Europe, until I find the actual name. And I guess in this respect, you could, if you wanted to be really very definitive, you could say that this is where the Sylvan Elves kind of came from.
Okay.
And then after this, it was more like, okay, from here, when things kind of progress in history. So the continent is called Vetia, which is the European continent, but all the others I was 100% right on. So the Vetian elves, they kind of expanded their domains, and they explored the globe, and they found the Isles of Aldan, which is essentially maybe if you wanted to kind of put a modern day label on it, you might say it's Great Britain. So
I think looking at the world map now, it seems to be kind of a little more distance from Vetia than Great Britain is from Europe. It seems to be more in between the two continents, at least according to this map.
Yeah, that's correct. So it's kind of somewhere in the middle of the two continents. For those watching on YouTube, I'm just going to chuck it up now, so you can actually have a look. I'm going to try. There we go. So
Aldan is where the Highborne Elves live nowadays, right?
Yeah. So this colony became the Highborne Elves, and then from here, as with the real world British Empire, the Highborne Elves expanded as a global power. They colonized many parts of the world, a lot of the islands, a lot of the Middle Sea, and also a lot of Selexia. So the elves that moved to Selexia in the same way as the Americans did when they kind of started to colonize and expand their domains in America. The Selection Elves also have the same kind of dichotomy of power. So what happened was there was a split between the Selection Elves and the Aldan Elves, which created this schism in between the Elven Empire.
So can I ask, what was the Tea Party incident in this case?
I don't know enough of the history to comment.
Damn it.
Sorry. Only an overview today. And obviously they established their cities in Selexia, and there was some kind of war between the two. Both were naval powers, and both now kind of compete for the trade routes and the colonies and things like that. So, going back to your question, is where do the Dread Elves live, and what do they? What was the second part?
Kind of like what's the climate like? Like what is it? What kind of environment do they live in?
Yeah. So the kind of the climate and the environment where they live is Selexia. At least that's where we can call it a maritime empire. I think that's a bit of a loose term because they don't necessarily have an empire. I think they have a few colonies dotted around, but they're more slavers rather than colonizers. So whereas
they live along the coast, then like it's not like modern day America where it's like kind of a lot of inland stuff as well.
I'd say it's more like colonial America, where most of the settlements are along the waterways and the coast. Yeah. And obviously the interior is probably inhabited more by like beasts or something more sinister.
Yeah, like wilderness, basically.
Yeah. So you might equate it to something like an early colonial America where at least that's the similar environment. As soon as you go north, when you get to Rathan, which is the northernmost Dread Elves settlement, it gets a lot colder, so it's something more like Canada. I don't know specifically, but
I resemble this comment.
I'm going to be very careful because I'm sat with a Canadian.
Yeah.
So it's a lot colder. There's maybe not snow all year round, but it's.
Oh, there's definitely not snow all year round. No. Don't be ridiculous.
but you get.
Yeah, have you been to Vancouver, mate?
Sorry.
Have you been to Vancouver, mate?
No.
Yeah, but we're on the east side of Canada. I mean, Selexia.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's still a very cold, harsh climate in Rathan.
Okay.
But in Caindraken, which is the more southern settlement, it's a little bit warmer, more temperate, a bit more suited to plantations and slave and things like that.
So you've mentioned the word slave a lot of times so far, and I guess something I wanted to ask, since I know you guys go into a lot of detail, is kind of what is the kind of socioeconomic setup of the Dread Elf society. You know, if today you could have equate societies throughout history as medieval or capitalist or stuff like that. Like how do the Dread Elf society function on that kind of level?
I think it's maybe something like the South American or the southern United States kind of. Where there's a lot of slaves on plantations and things like that. So I think the Dread Elves, they have two main commodities. One is slaves and one is silver. And everything is valued in like a slave or silver price. So you can trade for slaves or you can trade for silver. And the economy is very heavily based on captured slaves from all over the world. So the Dread Elf ships and fleets and raiders, which are predominantly led by Corsairs, travel the world collecting slaves, either selling slaves to people or bringing slaves home to Selexia to kind of fuel the economy, fuel the production. But the elves themselves, it's a bit like something like Sparta, maybe, where the helots are kind of doing all the work, and the citizens themselves are more the warrior elite class. That's not to say that there's no elves that work the fields. It's just that it's less common.
Okay.
So the economy and the society itself is like built on an underclass of slaves, and I would say slave revolts are probably fairly common, but they are also very ruthlessly put down.
Yeah. Usually those two go hand in hand, I guess.
Yeah.
You said that the elves are usually warriors. So assuming you're not in the absolute lowest class and do manual labor, what do the elves do in society?
Okay, so all the elves are militarily trained, every single one. If you're
Okay, so draft basically.
Yeah. So if you're a commoner, then you'll go to the military academy, and there's many military academies all over Selexia. Each town or each city or each district will have a military academy, and every elf has, by law, to become a citizen, you have to graduate the military academy. Whether you graduate as an auxiliary or a legionary, that's two different things. But you need
based on your aptitude, or?
Yeah, based on your aptitude for killing, you'll become a legionary or an auxiliary. Alex is like, oh. I think we'll leave that discussion for the full book review. Yeah. So regardless of
I might hint at it again later, but we'll let you get started.
So you graduate the academy to become like a fully fledged citizen. If you're in the upper tiers of society, if you have a lot of money, rather than going to the academy, you will probably be privately trained. So not all of the citizens go to the academy, but to become like a citizen, if you're not a noble, then you have to graduate the academy. And so I think when you finish the academy, obviously you're a very well trained soldier, and you can kind of choose a profession when you come out of the academy. Okay. So most Dread Elf families have slaves who kind of do all the hard work and put bread on the table, which leaves them a lot of time for other professions. You could choose to go into the temple, where in the military sense, you might become a temple militant, or even if you're just someone who supports a certain god or is aligned to a certain god, you might be a militant of their order. You could become a Corsair, and that like a privateer, go off raiding and slaving. We're looking for a bottle opener. Where did it go?
So you mentioned the temple, and I think something that's, when we're still on like the overview part of this, something that's important to talk about is what is the pantheon, like what is the religious structure of society?
So the elves are a polytheistic religion. They have many gods. I think they have, from memory, 3 major deities, which represent a lot of the major themes in their society. And then under each of those gods, they kind of split into many other aspects. And I don't want to go into too much detail because, one, I don't know it all by heart, and 2, I'd probably be doing it injustice if I did. But they're very polytheistic, and they have lots of different aspects and lots of different gods that kind of overlap and intertwine and have relationships between one another.
Yeah, I guess what you can answer is society religious as a whole, or is it kind of like where the gods don't matter that much for most people?
I'm not sure. I think if I was going to make a guess, I would say they're probably fairly religious.
Yeah, because of all the temple militant and these kind of...
especially probably more so than the Highborne Elves, at least.
Yeah.
Who are probably more kind of pragmatic society. But I think elves in general are fairly religious. I don't think their religion goes as kind of fervent as maybe someone from Sonstal or Equitane or like the warriors, let's say. But the gods are still very close to what they believe and how they enact on a daily life.
Well, like you said, they have like professions in the temples, right? So like
not necessarily professions, but they may be some will do. Some will be priests. Some will be like members of the temple, but not necessarily work for the temple. But they will be called upon in a time of war when the temple want to join a faction. Think of it a bit like a trade union, where you join a union or a church, and if the church needs you, they'll call upon you when they want to go to battle or they want to use their might or their power to kind of display or something like that.
Yeah, but usually like the reason a church can like call upon you is because you're religious enough to fight for that cause.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So I think, like, on what Casimir was asking, it kind of sounds like they're religious enough.
Yeah.
You know,
As I said, they're fairly religious, but not as fervent as maybe like someone from the Empire of Sonsdal who's like a giant who's a big fan of Sunna, or a Kingdom of Equitaine knight who's dedicated to the lady.
So what you're saying is that when you see temple militants on the table, they're not like necessarily religious fanatics.
No, but they are fighting for their cause.
Okay. So something I know you wanted to ask about, Alex, is like how we know that there's like a lot of beasts, right, in the Dread Elves, like the Dread Elf book. So how does all of that like kind of come into their society?
Yeah, like there's like these creatures, right, that they bring in with their armies, and I just kind of thought to myself, like, okay, like how do these even belong here? Do you know what I mean? Like, you've got the Gorgons, right? Which is like, I guess we don't like. I guess the first question is like, you know, what is a Gorgon, you know, socially? Because it's a human, or it's a creature, or a humanoid on top and a snake on the bottom. Do you know what I mean? And it's pretty badass at fighting. But like, are these things part of society? Or are they allies of the elves? Are they are they allies? Are they members of the society? Are they slaves? Are they what? Why is a Gorgon in this army?
So the Gorgons themselves are creatures that are kind of created by the god Yema. So Yema is one of the Dread Elf gods. It's one of the Dread Elf gods. I don't know so much about it to be able to talk about it in depth, but it's one of the deities that they worship. And to become a Gorgon, an elf will undergo some kind of ritual. I don't know necessarily the details of the ritual, but what will happen is that a portion of the god's power will come through the veil into the elf, and the elf will undergo a transformation. And the elf will basically turn into this Gorgon creature. So it's kind of like half elf, half demon. Something similar like we talked about with the demons book before, where a supernal can come through the veil and take the form of or like possess a creature. So it's essentially like a demon of Yema that's come through the veil, possessed an elf, and kind of transformed the body of the elf as a vessel. And obviously a portion of that god's power is now part of the elf. And so while the elf retains some kind of autonomy, there's still like a supernal living as a symbiote or part of that organism.
Yeah, so this is an elf that wants to turn into a mutant weirdo.
Yeah, it's like a religious experience.
And then so like, as far as getting on the battlefield, that's one thing. But like, as far as like, okay, is this like what happens when like dark elves or dread elves like bully other dread elves so much in the academy instead of like you know, going all crazy and, you know, turning into like a weird I don't know what words they use for like antisocial nutters these days. But anyway, instead of like becoming something like that, they're like, I'm gonna throw myself into this because then like no one's gonna laugh at me anymore when I got a snake butt. You know, like like I'm just thinking about like on the field of battle, like in the context of the game. Okay, cool. I got like a couple of snake elf bros that are rolling around. But in context of like society, after this dude or dudette gets themselves religiously embodied by by a demonic creature that gives them a snake butt, do they like slither out of the temple like and go back home and be like, hey ma, I just turned into a snake butt version of myself?
I think the elves that are chosen for this, let's call it a task or religious rite, are probably the high priests of this order or this temple. So they're very, very well associated with the temple. They probably don't have lives outside the temple. Everything that they have is probably part of the temple, so that it's not like they slither off home and like feed their kids or something like that. I think they're very, very acquainted to the temple, and these would only be chosen for this reason.
And then they just like kind of spend their life in the temple being a snake priest.
Yeah.
Being like, respect my snake priest authority.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they last for a while then. So like they're like the symbiotes in the demon book.
Essentially immortal, right?
Okay.
As long as they have magic to sustain them, then they're immortal.
As long as they got a snake butt, they're good to go. Yeah. Cool. Okay. I mean, that's fine. We don't have to get into like the details of like what they do in the game on the table. It's just more like so we're talking about these dudes. They're all slavers. They're like sailing. They do whatever. Like, when's this? Like, how does this snake belong here? Snake Man is just like, what's up? I'm Snake Man. Like, I'm totally friends with these guys. Like, we're all buddies.
Slithering on up in there.
They like came by my island, and I was like, "Hey, you want like a snake bro to like hang out with?" And they were like, "Dude, high five, high tail."
High tail.
Like, let's party.
Give me one.
Yeah, nice. So like that's one thing, right? Then you've got. I think another one that's like an interesting creature is the Kraken.
Yeah.
Right.
Release the Kraken.
Right. Which there is one thing I do want to say that is actually game related on this, just because I think that you need to tell me a bit more about how this.
Okay, let me explain to you the background of the Kraken.
Yeah, all right.
And then you can not say the rule that's in the book.
Okay.
So, but maybe this will help you understand. So the Kraken is a monster that, at least, okay, the way I envision the Kraken is something like the Watcher in the water in Lord of the Rings. So that monster that sits in the pond next to Moria, that kind of like comes out of the water with all the tentacles.
Yeah.
So this is how I kind of view the Kraken. Like it can like walk onto land, like slither around and stuff, but it's like at home in the water. So this is a monster that's like a coastal predator. So it like swims around in the coast and like waits for things to come and hang out near the coast, and then it like ambushes them and like sucks them into the water and eats them. So its kind of prey is like big things. So anything that's large, that's what it wants to eat. So it's like this kind of like squid monster that kind of sits in the water, hides underneath the
surface.
Underneath the surface, exactly. And then as soon as it sees something coming by, it just like jumps on it and like sucks it in.
Okay. So without saying anything about the rules,
yeah,
right? The one thing that I think is kind of funny is that like not all maps in this game have water.
Yeah.
And the maps that do have water have like one piece of water.
Some have two. Yeah.
On the map. Okay, I've never played with like one with two. So like coast, there's no like coast you can have this creature floating around in, right? You gotta get him into this little block of water on this massive table. I
think when you look at the Kraken rules, which we're not going to talk about, there is a rule that where some of the terrain on the table can affect how useful the Kraken is. So you should not see this as like this is how we think you should use the Kraken. You should think of it more as this is an added bonus if you can make it work in this way, and the cost reflects that.
Yeah. Okay. So I think one thing that's you can maybe touch upon in regards to Kraken, but also maybe the Hydra and so on, is like how do they control these monsters? Like if this thing lives in the water all the time, like why does it help the Dread Elves?
The Dread Elves Society is somewhat based on, as we alluded to before, like Sparta. We also said it's a republic, so it's something similar to like a mixture of Sparta and Rome in its culture. So the Dread Elves, when they're not like killing stuff or learning how to kill stuff, they're enjoying other people killing stuff for their own pleasure. Something similar to like the Colosseum. So there's the beast taming side of the Dread Elves is quite a big aspect, and the beast tamers put these monsters into the Colosseums, into their amphitheaters, and like make them fight each other for money, for power, for glory, to bet on, for entertainment. So this is quite a big part of their culture, and the Kraken is just one of these monsters that's captured, tamed, broken, and put into the arena. A bit like a big Pokemon battle. Alex is looking at me like, what the fuck?
Basically, it's a tentacle. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, it's like a big, giant tentacle that goes around doing reps on people, and then
that's
poison
a really good model.
sting.
Like just making a tentacle model and putting it on the table.
Maybe that's more of a Mr. Leviathan thing.
See, I look at it like this.
Gotta get all the Pokemon in there.
One of the things that you've talked about, I mean, one of the units groups they're called Corsairs. We know that they sail the seas, taking, raiding. They're raiders, coastal raiders. They're slavers, right? All that kind of stuff. And so like in that sense, having some like water themed creatures sort of makes sense because like they're out there on the high seas.
Yeah.
And like what's better to have on the high seas next to your ships if you're gonna have like a sea battle or something than a fucking Kraken, right? Like, hey Kraken, go like eat that ship over there. Yeah. Okay, boss, I'll be back in 5. No, like that's like awesome, right? I mean, I saw Pirates of the Caribbean when they had the Kraken in it.
Release the Kraken.
Yeah, it was sweet. Kraken was sweet.
Yeah.
So like I can't complain about that. I think what's kind of funny about it is that the Kraken to me feels like the only real like actual like water thing that comes with the Dread Elves, right? Everything else like has like you can call these guys Corsairs. You could call them. I mean, is there anything else that has like a shippy, saily kind of sounding
Not really,
name, right? So they don't even. So despite this being like a big part of their background story, there's only this one little sort of nod to it with this Kraken, right? Everything else is not water based or watery or sea ship related, and I guess that's fine because all the battles happen on land, so it's not like suddenly there's going to be like opportunities for them to like have their ships on
boat
battles and shit.
I think this is it's a mixture of things. It's a mixture of like legacy things that have to kind of be included in the book. I think people would be very sad if we discontinued the Kraken and like merged it into a Hydra, for example. I think that would have been a mistake for us to go down that route. Whether it would have been good or not, I don't know. But we had to kind of include a Kraken into the book, and it was never a consideration that we wouldn't have a Kraken in the book. I think the background is obviously to an extent. We had to kind of build it to facilitate the legacy models and the legacy that we have. And as you say, it's a bit strange to have like one water-based monster, but it's a faction that has a very kind of nautical culture, even though there's only one unit that represents that in the book. I still think it's like a viable thing to have in the book and something that needs to be represented.
I mean, I get more than anything that it's something that people would have been bummed out if it wasn't there. I guess what I'm saying is when you say yes, there's this nautical sort of element to them, and then the only things that really have anything to do with being on ships or being at sea or the Navy or whatever, like You know, I mean, you could have a unit of Marines, right? Like, they could be basically like that. Marines are infantry unit,
but that's Corsairs, right?
That are sea based. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, but maybe you could like have maybe there could be like an ambushing mechanic, something like that would represent these people like outflanking armies by traveling to different places with their ships or something. I don't know.
I think the Corsair special rules actually do that quite well.
Okay. But yeah, let's not get into rules.
Yeah, I don't. The beauty is I don't even remember what those are, so so I can't get it. So, okay, nice one. Casimir's like, let's not get into those rules.
I think I don't remember that. If someone's listening to exactly what Casimir said, I think when you read the rules, it will basically say exactly what Casimir said.
Okay, great. So basically, everything you did was great, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, with cheese, the cheese is even better.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay, so welcome back to Amazon Podcast, episode 57/8.
It was definitely 58. We talked about it for the first 10 minutes of the podcast.
All right, episode 58. We're talking Dread Elves Background. So I think Casimir or Alex had a question about some Thunder Packs.
Yeah. What is the Thunder Pack and what's happening?
Okay, so
why do they belong here? What business do they have hanging out with Dread Elves?
Okay, so as we alluded to, Selexia is something like the North American frontier in the colonial period. So in this period in our world history, the continent was inhabited by the Native Americans, who were largely subsistent on the buffalo herds. So you could equate these animals, the actual beasts themselves, as a 9th Age equivalent of buffalo.
Fighting buffalo.
Not necessarily fighting buffalo, but just like angry, large animals. And I think so the inspiration behind this came from a prehistoric animal called a toxodon, which is essentially like a gigantic
woolly rhino.
Maybe not woolly, more like a rhino without a nose horn, with a longer tail. So if you want to look it up on Google, just search for toxodon.
Yeah, it looks just like kind of like a splice between a bear and a rhino-ish.
Yeah, exactly.
Rhino bears.
So in the 9th Age background, this is supposed to represent something that is native to Selexia. So a reasonably common animal to find, and something that the Dread Elf beast masters or beast tamers or lash masters, whatever you want to call them, they obviously look like on the lookout for beasts to break to their will. And as these are native to Selexia, they're kind of top on the hunting list for the beast tamers. So they take these beasts, and obviously they want to, as the Dread Elf society is very geared around killing people, around war, around dominating other species. The beast tamers use them in an aggressive way for battle or for the arena. So basically, the basic idea is that a group of tamers can kind of maneuver these beasts in a very agile way, tell them where they want to go with their whips, like move them around. They can be an asset on the battlefield.
And are they used in any are they used in a domestic sense as well, or?
Not sure about like agriculture or anything like that, but they're certainly used in the arena.
Wow, yeah. So I think one thing we haven't really touched about so far is how magic comes into this.
Wait! You're just gonna let it go right there, Casimir?
Okay.
Easy there. You're just gonna fucking stop talking about fucking rhino bears?
Yeah.
That quick? Just like, oh, okay. Oh, they use them in the arena.
Casimir was satisfied with that.
No big deal. Well, I'm not satisfied.
All right, let's hear the sass. Let's hear it.
So, these people, these elves, go out
Said in a derogatory manner.
spend all of their time.
This
Right.
wine, this is
It's
fucking
delicious. It's
so
a delicious wine. But no, quit trying to distract me from my
Sorry,
sassy point here.
sorry.
Spend all this time like training themselves to be beast tamers. Then they go out and they find the biggest, weirdest fucking rhino bears they can to be like, hey, rhino bears, come hang out with us. And the rhino bears are like, suck my rhino bear balls. Right? And then the beast tamers, who are like light as an elf, somehow are like, hi, diddly dee, diddly doo. And then the fucking rhino bears are like, all right, I'll come party with you now, bro. Like, what?
Okay, think of it like a bison, right? So if you're like a beast tamer and you have like a whip and you're like dominant person, you can like herd them all up, round them all up like
Tiger King.
Wait, so they drug the rhino bears?
They must drug the rhino bears. They're giant rhino bears. And they're skinny little elf people. I mean, I don't care if the elf's got a whip. He's still a skinny ass elf.
Yeah, but an elf is like agile, can like dodge them and stuff.
Yeah, and they're probably, hey, Casimir, they're also really, really good at killing, right? Hey, they're really, really good at killing.
Yeah, they are. It's true.
Yeah, but they're not trying to kill this guy. They're trying to tame him.
Yeah, but they know.
Yeah, like how do you know? Like how do they? Yeah, but how do they tame them? Like, how do you like? Do you just torture these animals, or like what do you do to tame them?
Yeah, is this like a Ringling Brothers circus style deal here?
I mean, I know how to train horses, but I don't think it's quite the same. Because
I hope you don't torture any horses.
Well, no, otherwise we'd all be walking around or riding around on rhino bears right now.
Yeah, so I think they have to kind of put them through a bit brutal kind of some might say torture. Yeah, I mean they're beast breakers. They break the beasts by whipping them into shape. It's probably quite a painful experience for the beasts.
Just imagine if they had one rhino bear whisperer in that team, right? Instead of using aggression and violence, they just talked to the rhino bear.
I think that's more of like a Sylvan Elf deal.
Basically whispered to the rhino bear.
I think the character of the Dread Elves is more like, you do what we say, and where the Sylvan Elf is more like, let's have a chat and make a discussion, and then we can maybe come to an agreement.
So what you're saying is the Dread Elves are, somehow imperialist, and they kind of live in North America.
I think you can just say it honestly, Casimir. They're dickish.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's what we're getting at here.
I mean, they're arrogant, they're brash, they're very.
No resemblance to real world culture at all.
Those are all synonyms to dickish.
Okay. If that's the word that you want to use, then go for it. Go with it.
I think it's a lovely word. Yeah, so I mean, so they're kind of dicks, and they want to, and they're just a bunch of assholes who walk around, trying to subjugate, and then they're like, what would be the coolest thing to subjugate is a rhino bear.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think something that you need to understand about all elves is that they view elves as a superior race to humans, to dwarves, to everything else.
Oh, this is also not at all relevant to real world politics. I see. Interesting.
But it's like an alien culture. So
supremacists.
I wouldn't say necessarily supremacists, but they're very pragmatic in the way that they see themselves in comparison to the rest of the world. They definitely see themselves as superior. They see humans as like just another animal species to be dominated or tamed or trained.
I think you could pretty much say supremacist there fits the bill.
Yeah, but perhaps, yeah. But I think that has a different connotation to this because it's another species rather than one race over another race.
Yeah. But I mean, they're a metaphor.
Yeah, if you want to be metaphorical, then for sure.
I mean, for sure. But not only do I want to, but I mean, you have said that, the inspiration for a number of these these races and cultures are based around different cultures of the world anyway, right? So like to not draw that parallel, I think is to shy away from, you know, a suggestively political statement, which maybe is the point of shying away from it, but it's already been made, right? So you might as well own it.
Yeah. Okay.
Is the way that I look at it.
Okay. So let's call them supremacists then. So the elves in general are supremacists. They consider themselves above all other races. They see, because they live longer, they're smarter, they're faster, they're more agile, whatever. So they consider themselves above all other species, and the Dread Elves in particular. I think they kind of, it's their kind of culture.
They're the Malfoys of the supremacy.
Yeah, they're kind of it's their kind of culture to dominate other species.
Right? Don't you just see them as like, what's Draco Malfoy's dad again?
Lucius.
Don't you see them as just a bunch of Lucius Malfoys walking around, just be like, yeah, you stupid humans.
Those muggles.
They all have like a long-haired backstick.
It's a bunch of muggles. Yeah, they're walking around with their like pimp canes and their black cloaks, just like muggle. You know, I think I mean that makes it that kind of nails it for me all of a sudden. Do you know what I mean? Okay. Just a bunch of Lucius.
So hopefully that kind of puts things into context as regards to taming other beasts and being a hunter or a slaver.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I guess on a broad perspective, then would you say that the Dread Elves are like the people who take that kind of supremacy like actively in the sense that they subjugate people, and maybe the Highborne Elves are more passive in the sense that they believe the same things, but they don't really enforce it in that way?
I think the Highborne Elves are more sinister than you might think.
That's interesting.
But when you say like, do the Dread Elves pursue supremacy? I don't think they do, but I think it's more pragmatic. I think slavery is a part of their economy. And I think it's more of a case of like they think like, okay, well, humans and other races are just there as like a resource to be conquered or captured or taken advantage of, and if they can, then they will. Whereas the Highborne Elves, their economy is more based around trade, rather and like colonialism rather than slaving.
Okay.
So you said something about magic?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So like one thing I wanted to know about was because we haven't touched upon. We talked about the religious aspect, but how does like magic and magic users come into society, and is it tied to religion in any way?
Yeah. Magic in the Dread Elf Society is very much tied to religion. So the schools of magic in the Dathran Republic are based around the temple. So if you want to become a magic user in the Dread Elves Society, then you usually will go through the temple to become a magic user. Like if you show any promise in the magical arts, then either you'll be picked up by the temple, or you will go to the temple of your own accord and say, look, I have some kind of aptitude here, like teach me. And then you'll get trained in the temple as a magic user. So the other side of the coin, let's say, to become a magic user in the Dread Elf Society is that there were a lot of mages during the strife between the Arandai Empire and the Selection Empire, or the Selection colonies. During this split, there was a number of wizards who didn't want to join the Empire and were kind of like outcast by the Empire because of their practices were a bit unorthodox, let's say.
Okay.
So they were kind of outcast by the Aranda Empire at the same time as this kind of civil strife was going on, and so they fled to Selexia to avoid persecution. And when they arrived in Selexia, this cadre of mages, let's say, was also shunned because of their kind of unorthodox practices. So they kind of went to the outskirts of society, but continued their studies in the magical arts. And these became the Warlocks. So the Warlocks in the Dread Elves Society are these elves who are very powerful magic users, but they're shunned by society, and they obviously practice these arts which are a little bit forbidden when it comes to, let's say, like orthodox elven magic or religion or whatever. So they're a little bit kind of, it's not quite so cool to be a warlock in Dread Elves Society. People kind of look a bit like, oh, these guys are not so trustworthy. Then they're a bit like necromancers or something like that.
In a cave, basically.
Yeah, so they're very much outcast. They're very secluded, and so the other side of the coin in regards to the Dread Elf magic users are these warlocks. So the Dread Elf state, they acknowledge that the warlocks are very powerful and useful on the battlefield, so they employ them as mercenaries. But otherwise, they're shunned by society because of their malpractice. And the third type of magic user in the Dread Elf Society is somewhere in between the two, the Warlock and the Temple. You have these Warlock Acolytes, which are Temple agents that are sent to kind of spy on the Warlocks, but the Warlocks use them as like workhorses, so that they kind of do tasks for the Warlocks. So they're somewhat double agents, somewhat learning from the Warlocks. There's like a very much of like a nuanced relationship between the Acolytes and the Warlocks, and the Acolytes and the Temple. They're kind of double agents working both sides, spying on the Warlocks to make sure that they're not becoming too powerful, but also gaining power themselves while feeding information back to the state.
Interesting. So one thing, I don't know if it's saying too much about the rules, but kind of the Warlocks are really the most powerful casters or magicians or wizards in the society.
Yeah.
But then the Temple Legates, they're also magic users, but they're not as proficient. Is this because there's some kind of ban on pursuing magic too far, or like is there a reason why these people aren't like masters of magic?
I think it's a mixture of things. You could say that the temple itself doesn't have the proficiency that maybe the colleges of Aldan have. They don't have that kind of mastery of magic, so it's a little bit more difficult to get that proficiency that maybe the Highborne Elves have in the institutions. Whereas the Warlocks are allowed to freely pursue the arts without any distractions, without any kind of orthodox hindrance to what they can do. So they can freely explore the Veil, and they can freely explore their chosen path and become a master in that kind of respect. Whereas the guys in the temple, they're doctrinated and they're learning from their peers, which have only achieved mediocrity compared to the Warlocks.
I think obviously you know the background, but when I hear the way that these two things are sort of separated, right? These two major characters that end up, being in the game, right?
Yeah.
Like the Warlocks sound like, wild magic, right?
Yeah.
Or like you could think of them as like the Sith in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah,
just like
this is actually something that we talked about during the background.
Like free to go and just like dive deep into the darkest recesses of their
100%.
Like, allow their creativity in sort of evilness or badness to kind of take over, or emotion, or like just let it themselves go in whatever direction the wind sort of blows. Whereas like the temple users are restricted. It may not necessarily be like that the temple doesn't have the power of magic, but it's more that it's the order, right, that keeps it so deeply or so difficult to sort of ascend, right? Because you don't have the freedom to explore those things which may come naturally to you, because you're part of this very specific order that you can't deviate from, right? So you're staying in your lane. Yeah. And by staying in your lane, you don't have the opportunity to grow by self-exploration and become better.
I think the association of like the Warlocks with the Sith is something that's really interesting and like quite relevant. And that's definitely something that we discussed during the background talks and during the design process, is like these kind of like dark wizards that are going down this path, and their rules reflect how wild and uncontrolled their magic is. So they're very powerful spellcasters, but there's also a downside to their casting ability.
Yeah, interesting. I think that is kind of interesting as a thing, but I don't understand this third character, the Acolyte. I don't understand. Like the premises that they go like. So the way that I hear you say it is like it's sort of like how the in ancient Greece, like the oracles would get like slaves sent to them to like do their shit for them because they were too busy getting high and predicting the future. And it's sort of like they're like, so like the society is like, we need you to predict the future or to do your dark warlocky ways, and as like a sign of acknowledgement, but also it's a way to keep our eye on you, we're sending you these servants, right? So these are the acolytes or whatever. So the acolytes are not dedicated to the warlocks. No. They're actually servants of the society. Who are there to, I guess, like you said, keep tabs on them, but also glean some of their power.
Exactly.
But then I don't remember actually. Do they actually have a character in the game?
There's a unit.
So it's like a whole unit.
Yeah, it's a unit of fast cavalry or light troop cavalry. I'll drink.
That has magic. Like the unit has magic.
They have an upgrade where they can be a wizard adept.
The unit can be a wizard.
Yeah, the champion. Yeah.
For the champion. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can boost their champion to have actually that's like is that the only champion in the game?
No, there's many units like this
that have the ability to have magic.
There's like there's a rule called Wizard Conclave, which I believe.
Yeah.
Or at least, exactly, Wizard Conclave, which is essentially like a unit that can have a champion that becomes a wizard. So you have like a whole unit being a wizard, basically.
Yeah. So there's I think in the end, in probably every elf book, there will be a unit that can do this.
Yeah. What are some other examples in the game of
Briar Maidens, Wraiths?
Oh yeah, Wraiths and the vampires. Yeah, because I think all three elf books have something, or maybe not.
Highborne Elves don't yet.
Yeah, but maybe in the future then.
Yeah.
Because they need more.
Yeah.
They obviously need more. I mean,
there's
not enough. The Highborne Elves don't have enough yet. They don't have enough. They don't have enough rules. They don't have enough characters.
Are you that salty about the High Elves, Alex?
They don't have enough. They don't have enough items. They don't have enough spells. They don't have enough abilities.
Maybe they need more honors.
They don't have enough special rules. They don't have enough unit types. They don't have enough. They should get extra points. Don't you think? Like if you play like a 4,500 point game, the Highborne Elves should just get 5,000 points. Because they just don't have enough. Like they're so underpowered. It's so hard to play Highborne Elves.
The last game you played against Highborne Elves, you won.
Yeah, because Pete had that ridiculous group of Lancers He's rolling around like, Lancers are cool. And then he rode them right into the very front of a Feldrak block, and they got 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he could have not done that, and then I would have lost.
To be fair, but yeah.
So what I want to ask, I think one of the final questions, I think is how do we know there's assassins in the Dread Elf book? Like, how do they fit into this story?
It's great. Where in society did the assassins fit in?
Okay.
Yeah.
So as we kind of alluded to before, the Dread Elf society, the Dread Elves or elves in general as well, see other species as inferior races, inferior species. So they look down on all species and they see it as their kind of, we could say, God-given right to hunt, to enslave, to dominate other races, other species, other nations. And the Dread Elves are kind of the top of this food chain when it comes to this kind of philosophy. So this in the Dread Elf Society, there's something called the Hunting Lodge, which is this society of hunters. And in this society, you get things like the Black Cloaks, the Shadow Warden, or what are they called now, the Shadow Riders. These kind of fringe peoples who are perhaps nomadic, perhaps just not necessarily outcasts, but more kind of reclusive in society.
The fringes.
Yeah, and the assassins are part of this hunting lodge. So to employ an assassin, you will go to the hunting lodge and pay a price or some kind of favor, whatever, and get the services of an assassin, and then the assassin will do your bidding for whatever price you paid. And the assassins themselves are very highly trained. They are like employed by these hunting lodges to purely just to train to kill whatever mark they're given, and that's kind of their gig. Like it's a little different to the Games Workshop background, where it was part of the Temple of Cain. The assassins are very much part of the hunting lodge compared to the temples.
But so here's the thing, like, to me, like, because the Dread Elves are so, I would say they sound so fucking self-involved.
Yeah,
right?
very much so.
Right, like they're not mingling with the Highborns.
No, they're at war.
Right, so they're not, and they don't give a shit about the Sylvans.
No.
And they're going and they're slaving humans and dwarves and
everyone,
and
saurians and rats and
anyone they can get their hands on, right?
Yeah.
So to me, like, these assassins are really like would be generally an internalized device for manipulation of power.
Yeah.
Right. Like I wouldn't
100%.
imagine that they hire assassins to go kill somebody in the kingdom of Equitaine, because like they don't give a fuck about those people, right? Like they're gonna go with their raiding party and they're gonna take a bunch of peasants and they're gonna leave before the knights rally, right? It was like kind of their attitude. It's like, why would we bring an assassin? We're just gonna steal some people and go home, right? Like, whereas it'd be more like Jimbo over there from House, Douche Conan, is really like messing with my finances, or like I owe him money from a poker game and I don't want to pay, so I'm just gonna like hire an assassin for half the price I owe him and assassinate him, right? Like that sounds like more like the dickish, Lucius Malfoy type of characters that I'm coming to imagine these dark elves as being, right? It's like there's like, fuck that guy. Like I'll just get him whacked, right? Like
I think you're, to an extent you're right. I think the assassins are definitely something that is like happens internally between the different Dread Elves, but at the same time, I think you have to kind of be a bit more open-minded with regards to how factions interact in the Ninth Age. There's a lot of colonies for overseas colonies in the Ninth Age, I think that's something that has to be apparent for the factions to interact. So let's just say, for example, that the Equitane, they do have a colony in Varentia, which is in just the south of Selexia. It's called Fredericksburg or something like that. I can't remember. There's a port. We can have a check on the map.
Fredericksburg.
Maybe that's an Empire colony. It's definitely there on the map.
Huh. That's good. So where was it?
In Varentia. Yeah, it's there. But the Equitane one is just below
Yeah,
it.
Fredericksburg. And then I don't know how to say that.
Aguili or something. Aguil. Anyway,
Yeah, maybe
there is an Equitane city there. So I think the implication in the Ninth Age is that there's lots of colonies everywhere, and everyone has a claim on each other's land just to bring the factions interaction with each other. So maybe this Equitane Duke or whatever is like impeding on the Dread Elves holdings in Selexia, and they're going to send an army out there to kind of have a rough and tumble with them. While at the same time, they're going to send an assassin to deal with said Duke and his bitches.
Just to go right for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I could also see, like, in the case if the Dread Elves have an overseas colony in Vetia, and like somebody, they want to buy shit or slaves or whoever, and somebody's like causing trouble, I guess they might just have that person assassinated.
And again, so we're not going to talk about the actual game rules, but then that sort of alludes to the idea that assassins are character killers.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's what they're there for. So I mean, you're talking about a book where you've got like a variety of interesting, powerful characters that can kill that obviously would be character killy.
Mm-hmm. They're good at killing.
But then, because they're good at killing, right, Casimir? But then also, you've got a very specific character killer type, right?
Are you commenting on design or are you commenting on background?
Well, I'm talking about actually for this. I guess I'm kind of stammering along the line of both, right? It's like you've got a lot, like you have an entire society that are good at killing. Right, and then these ones are highly specialized at killing, I guess, elite members of society.
Valued targets.
Yeah, because it's sort of like the idea is that what you said at the beginning of the conversation is that everybody in the Dread Elf society that's a Dread Elf knows how to fight. Everyone knows how to fight.
Yeah.
So they're all good at fighting. They're all varying levels of good at fighting. And then the rich people, you said, they get like privately trained. So those elves are probably really, really good at fighting. Mm-hmm. So then to deal with somebody who's going to be a person in a position of power, who's been privately trained their whole life, you need to get somebody who's like...
Even better trained.
Yeah,
and that's the assassins.
So that's your...
Yeah.
But then also societally, assassins don't tend to be like high level members of society, right? You don't usually have like if this is a republic, you don't have like it's not some senator or some senator's kid that's an assassin. It's some
as I said, it's like the
gutter rat that they've.
It's like not the outcast, but like the fringes of society.
Yeah, so it's like some emo kid.
Yeah, 100%.
Right. They're like, you want to play with really cool knives?
He's like,
come to our lodge. Get in my van with no windows. Come to my lodge.
Do you want to be a lodge?
Yeah. I have no comment to what happens in the lodge. No idea what happens in there.
Yeah. What's up with the lodge? Is there a lot of like rhino bears in there? Or
I think maybe on the walls. Yeah.
So I guess one final question I just thought about was what is the governing structure of the country or society? I guess this is something I was thinking about in relation to more factions in Knife Edge. Like, are there different countries, or are they more of a is there like one country of Dread Elves that are like ruled by one thing, or are there different ones? And also, what is that thing then?
Okay, so lots of questions there.
Yeah, basically all the questions.
So the Dread Elf, I'd say what we're trying to represent in the rules is the Dread Elf Republic, which is based around Rathan, which is in the north of Selexia. So this is a republic of many cities, of many people, of many elves, also overseas colonies. Excuse me. That is based around a senate, so like a political elite, which elect 3 consuls. We'll call them consuls because I don't know what the title is, but we can go with consul for now because I think that's familiar with what people understand. It has 3 consuls, which I think they're elected for X amount of years, and then again every X amount of years they're re-elected. Maybe they're re-elected, maybe it's new people. I'm not sure how it works.
So if you're not re-elected, do you think in this type of society you're dead?
Potentially, I don't know.
That also mirrors Rome pretty well, I think.
I think it could depend on how much you cling to power, and there's obviously as you say, like similar to Rome, it could mean many different things.
I just think like for a society of like aggressive warrior type people, right? Who fighting and raiding and slavery and power and wealth are all like the core pillars of their society. The idea of like being selected to be a leader of that entire nation or empire, and then being not selected, it would be like it would be sort of like, I think it would be hard for somebody like that to step down. Do you know what I mean? To be like, oh yeah, no big deal. I served my term, right? Like I did my 4 years or my 8 years, and you guys want to go a different direction? No big deal. Like I'll see you guys on the raiding party, right? Later. All right, cool. They're gonna be like, I own this place. I'll kill you all. Right?
I don't know how it works in that respect, but that's the outline of the system is that there's 3 consuls.
Yeah. No, I'm not. I'm just saying, like the to me, the psychology of the
it makes
society.
Sense. It makes sense what you're saying.
The way that it's been presented to me, this makes the most sense, right? Is it like somebody who, if everything is about, shows of force, strength, wealth,
if you've been successful,
power,
then you would assume that you would continue to be in power, right? It's a bit like an alpha male kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So if you're no longer the alpha male, like what are you? You're probably dead, right? But I mean,
that's a depressing way of looking at life.
It's the Game of Thrones.
What's saying in the Game of Thrones, you either win or you die. Yeah.
True.
So I hope that answers your question, Casimir.
Yeah. Another one sprang to mind. So for a long time in the Ninth Age, we had this wonderful name for units called the Dread Judges.
Yeah.
And luckily, they got changed to Judicators. Okay. But I think I would just like to know, like, what do the Judicators do in society? Just like, because are they actually still judges?
For
yes. Dread Elves?
Yes.
Dread Judges, you might say?
So the Judicators are something like a military police force. They're part of the Temple of Nab, and they basically mete out the justice of the temple. So is
that like religious law or?
Yeah, maybe. I think it's both religious and secular. So as I said, I'm not 100% familiar with the background. But I'm pretty sure what the idea behind this unit is that they're like the military police. So if there's any kind of disturbances or secular problems, these are kind of like the disciples of Nab that take care of the internal struggles within the Republic. And in times of war, they can also be called upon to serve in the military.
So, but you also define them as the types. I keep trying to say the people, but they're elves, so I don't know. You want to say people, but they are the group which I think you initially defined them as the group which like basically doles out the justice of the temple.
Yeah.
And what I'm curious about is like how much that tells me something very interesting about the society, or it's kind of schizophrenic about the background, which is that we talk about how the empire is ruled in this sort of almost republic style with 3 major consuls who run things, but then there's also these temples which make their own rules separately. Do they answer? Do the temples answer to the consuls? Do the consuls answer to the temples?
So I think that the temple, like as I said, like the cult of Nab, like Nab is this kind of, let's call it war crow, is like the personification of Nab, and this particular god is kind of the legal judicator of the elven pantheon. So is also like the lawgiver. So these judges are kind of personified as like the law of the Dread Elf Society. So I think a lot of the legal disputes and the confrontation in like policing comes from this temple. Whereas I think when we think as humans as like a law, we think of like the government as like the lawgivers, because that's how it is in our society. But in the Dread Elf Society, I think the law comes from this temple of Nab, which is more kind of have the court and they have everything within the temple. So the actual law and the legal issues are based within the temple, which makes
it like a theocratic type of system.
Yeah, exactly. And these let's call them executioners are the actual police force that enact the laws of Nab. They're both judge, the jury, and executioner.
Oh wow, that's so impressive.
So they are like totally still Judge Dreds.
100%.
But like I guess the thing, like to me, the reason why this is sort of schizophrenic, right, is because like if the law is run by a religious sect and the government is run by a like non-religious electoral or electorate or elected group, then the law can come for the government whenever it wants, right? So I'm a consul, I'm running the empire, and then like the temple can send its judicators to try to like roll their justice over me.
Yeah, and that's where the Obsidian Guard come in.
Yeah, because like I ain't gonna let that shit happen.
Yeah, so
if I'm a consul,
that's why the
right?
Obsidian Guard are guarding the Senate and the Tower of Dekos. So the Obsidian Guard are these kind of elite soldiers that come from the academy.
So they are the deterrent. For the adjudicators to bugger off.
Yeah. So there's a balance of power.
Okay. But that sort of thing leaves room for, people getting snatched in the night and that kind of shit.
Oh yeah, it happens all the time.
Yeah, I guess that's compared to one thing that was present in old Games Workshop fluff was like this idea that everybody in Dark Elf Society like murdered each other all the time, and I guess since this is kind of like it's still using the same molds and this kind of stuff, so does that occur in Dread Elf Society?
I don't know. Maybe more than High Elf Society.
Okay, so it might be like a little bit less, like a little bit more lawless on the streets in a sense.
I think I wouldn't want to be very definitive, but I think that as like if you put yourself in a position of a Dread Elf, and you said this person has something that I want, if I'm powerful enough, I'm going to take it from them.
Yeah.
Whether that's like physically or politically, they will do that.
Yeah, it's the kind of some type of Darwinistic society, rule of the strong.
Yeah.
And if I'm not powerful enough, I'm going to go cry to the temple and hopefully get the temple to lean on this person instead.
Maybe, yeah.
But then, as soon as the temple's back is turned, that guy's
so good.
That guy's just going to like roll back over me and be like, "Oh, you wanted that? Like you wanted those 17 barrels of wine?
Yeah.
Well, they got them, but I'm going to take it out your ass now, right? Because the adjudicators are gone, right? Now I'm just going to give you a licking. I'm gonna take my fucking rhino bears and just
stampede all over your shit.
I'm just gonna ride them through your estate now, you know.
So, do you guys have any other questions about the Dread Elves or the society or anything like that?
No, I think we've covered most of the bases.
Yeah, I mean it's like I said, there's some elements that to me like it's tough for me to see balance, you know, in this society, because there are so many things that are imbalanced, and that like
yeah, I think you're thinking about rules right
no I actually the reason I laughed is because it's like it's like a metaphor for what I think about the rules too, in a sense. But I think that in and of itself, the way that this society is structured, it doesn't seem like there is it seems like it's a society that would be in constant strife or struggle, which I think is interesting, because to me then when I imagine a Dread Elf army, I imagine a Dread Elf army not as being like a united army of Dread Elves, but as like a faction. So I would say, like, to hop on a Game of Thrones reference, like a Dread Elf army would be like what might be like that you see on the field in a game might be like the Lannisters, but it's not Westeros, you know? That's the kind of way I look at it. Like, it's not like the entire continent of man fighting against the fucking Night King. It's like the Lannisters against the Tyrells, right? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get it.
Whereas, like, when I imagine, like, when I hear, like, the Dwarves, or or Aquitaine or whatnot, it doesn't sound quite as splintered or factioned, which is which is fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I mean, I think it certainly can play into like the actual tabletop quite easily, and it maybe allows players on the hobby side to talk about their faction, right? It's like, I'm Dread Elves, but I'm this house, right, or this family, or this,
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
because
I think that's important.
Because then it's sort of like it leaves room for this like creative flexibility, you know, to like help build your own little lore about your army, because they're so splintered, and you know, that would make them diverse in, you know, in their, not only in the types of makeups that might make up an army, but how different players might choose to make up their armies, but also, you know, in the style and in the art, and, you know, in the color, and, you know, like the color themes and stuff like that.
I think one thing that we should maybe just touch on is like the divergence from like evil elves or masochistic elves or like sexy elves or like whatever the Games Workshop background is.
Yeah, that's true.
Sexy porno masochist elf?
Like super objectified women elf in this army. Yeah,
like it's. I think something that is different, or like I think the key thing to take away is that these are not necessarily like elves that are bent on. They're not evil. They're not like depraved, like masochist, crazy berserker elves that maybe Games Workshop Background alluded to. These are just regular elves, but that have maybe more. I think the dreaded side of them comes out in more of that about their personality, because they're kind of frontiersmen. They're hard. They're killers. They're very pragmatic.
Well, I mean, come on. They also go around collecting slaves and stuff. So
yeah.
like, putting the word dread in front of yourself if you're a pirate is a pretty regular behavior.
Yeah.
Right.
So aside from their dreaded nature, they're not these kind of like sick, twisted elves that you found in Nagaroth. They're more similar to their Arandi cousins, let's say.
So I guess a good way to put it is that maybe their society is crueler to other people, but like when you're at home in a Dread Elf city, it's more like what you would imagine a normal city be like. Whereas in Games Workshop fluff, like a Dark Elf city was people murdering each other all the time.
Yeah,
and just
like nightmare on Earth.
Yeah, like you couldn't go outside at night because you would get killed and shit.
Yeah, so something I can talk about is something that I actually flesh out in the background, which is the distinction between the different classes in Dread Elf society. So obviously you have like a nobility, you have like a lower class, but what's most important in the Dread Elf society is actually if you're a citizen, if you're a foreigner, or if you're a slave. So the three different distinctions in society give you different rights. So just as an example, like slaves have pretty much no rights. Slaves always have to have an owner. If they don't have an owner, let's say like the owner dies with no heir, then the slaves automatically get sent to the temple. If you're a foreigner, then you can't own property in Dathan. You can rent it, but you can't own it. But you can own slaves. Just like some random things that we're talking about. If you're a foreigner, you can't bear arms in the Republic, or if you want to bear arms, you have to get a dispensation from the government that you can bear arms. And so there's quite a few distinctions between like a slave, a foreigner, and a citizen. And this is quite important in the society itself.
Can you be granted citizenship if you're not born there?
If you go to the academy, yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah, that's the mechanic.
But I mean, you'd also have to be an elf of some kind, right?
Yeah, yeah. You can't become a citizen if you're not an elf.
You're not going to be like an infernal dwarf who suddenly becomes a citizen. And
yeah,
I think there's probably some very like exceedingly rare cases, maybe like one in the history or something like that. But
I mean, and the other thing,
maybe an honorary citizen.
Like to me, like the whole slaving society and stuff really makes me think that these guys and the infernal dwarves would get along.
Yeah,
decently.
I mean, a lot of the slave trade goes through the infernal wasteland. So the Dread Elves, as I said, they there's two sides of their slave trade. One is bringing the slaves home, and the other is selling the slaves to other people. And the biggest buyer for the Dread Elf slave trade is the infernal dwarves. That's the biggest buyer. They also sell to other minor nations, but the infernal dwarves are the biggest buyer.
So one thing actually that we can touch upon then is there any type of special antagonism between elves and dwarves in this universe, or are they just chums as much as anybody else?
Yes and no. There was a point in which I think my ninth age ages is very hazy knowledge, But there was one age in which the beast or the orcs or the demons or someone was assailing the dwarven fortresses. No one really cares because they're dwarves, but someone was.
Isn't it like all of them were assailing at the once?
Yeah,
I think.
So someone was attacking them, and they had an alliance with the elves, and the elves didn't come to the aid.
Yeah, because they're douchebags.
Well, the reason that the elves didn't come to the aid is because they were having a civil war at the time.
Douchebags.
Sure. So this is why the dwarves don't like the elves.
Okay. And this is pre-split between the infernal and quote unquote normal dwarves.
Say again?
So this is pre the split, pre the inferno and everything, like when there was still just
one. You're asking me the wrong questions, Casimir. I don't know.
You need to brush up on your dwarf lore, man.
Yeah, but no one cares.
This is a podcast about dwarves now.
Yeah.
Like when they finally release the Infernal Dwarf army book, that's going to be great. Like we're just going to talk about dwarves the whole episode again. That's going to be good.
Never again. Haven't we already done Infernal Dwarves?
No, but not
we haven't done the full army book yet. Have you actually listened to the Warriors of the Dark Gods book that we did?
No, I don't have the time.
Yeah.
It's so long.
Yeah.
It's too long. There's too many things. The Infernal Dwarves have too many things. That's for sure.
I agree.
Doesn't make sense to have that many things.
But I think with that though, I think we've covered like the kind of the basic stuff at least, and then when you guys are done with the full army book, we'll come back and do like a little bit more detail on all the stories and characters that will be introduced, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I think hopefully if we get the background supplement in the next few weeks, then we will come back and do a full background supplement review and hopefully touch on a little bit more of these topics in detail. Yeah. But otherwise, I think we'll call it there. Thanks very much, Casimir, for joining us.
No problem.
I hope you're getting as drunk as we are.
Yeah, actually, like I don't have any beer today because I was too lazy. Because in Sweden, it's basically a dictatorship because you have to go to a fucking weird place to buy alcohol. So basically, I only had liquor. So
sounds like living in the Rathan Republic.
Yeah, basically, I can't go out at night because it's scary. So yeah, so I didn't have any beer, so I've just been drinking hard alcohol from the start.
Well, I would say if you're going to do any hobbying for the rest of the evening, good luck on those fine lines.
Yeah, so what I'm doing is I'm actually varnishing my dwarf molds because they're all like metal. So I'm varnishing them so they won't chip. So basically, I'm just coating the whole mold in a clear liquid.
Nice. Well, I guess you can spill.
It can be a bit messy.
Yeah, it can be a bit messy on that.
Still fuck up.
Okay, so if you want to get in touch with us, please send us mail at amatimedk@gmail.com. If you send us some mail, we will read it out. If you have any questions about the Dread Elves book, you can also send it to us via mail, or you can send me a PM on the forum at Henry P. Miller.
Yeah, you can also get in touch to us on the Twitter, which is at AmmerTimeDK.
And don't forget to like and subscribe for wherever it is that you're listening to Amber Time Podcast, whether that's on YouTube, SoundCloud, or I don't know, your mom's radio. Thanks for listening. How can I say?
That'll do.
Oh my god!
I'll cut it at your mom's radio.
Okay, nice.
No, that's good. I really.